Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about CRUD apps. These are apps where you can create, read, update, and delete an object. They're very common, and in this case, we've created something that is very simple. It's only about 30 to 40 lines of code, as you can see here. And the idea is that this is one of the simplest implementation of a CRUD app that you can use to then build upon and enhance yourselves. It is simply a proof of concept and how it works with SwiftUI and Core Data. I will also throw this code up on GitHub if you want to grab it and play with it directly. So let's get started with a new project and create a single view app. Make sure that after you name it something, the core data box is checked because we're going to need this to create the app. Once everything launches, let's clean up the code and get rid of everything we don't need, the comments, and just make it easier to read here. Then immediately we jump into the core data model, and here we're going to create an entity. We're going to call it animals, and it's only going to have one attribute called name, which is a string. So we're going to make a list of just animals to prove the point here. That's all we need to do to set up the model, and now to bring it into our struct, we set up a couple of properties. The first one is an environment. We say at environment, it's a managed object context, and we name it context. And secondly, we need to create a fetch request, which is then the entity is animals, because that's what we named our entity. So animals.entity open close bracket, and then sort descriptors open close square bracket, because we don't want to sort it by anything yet. It doesn't matter. Give it a name animals, and the of type fetch results animals. You'll notice here, actually animals isn't highlighted, so we have to quit Xcode and restart it for it to see what we've created in the data model. This is a bug with Xcode, and I haven't found a solution yet, but if you quit your Xcode at this point and then restart it, you should see animals being highlighted, which means that now Xcode recognizes this as an entity and you can start using it in your app. It's very clunky, but SwiftUI doesn't work great with core data yet, and hopefully that's something Apple will fix. But let's keep going, and we can create in the body a VStack, and inside it we'll create a for each loop of the animals variable that we created on line 5. We're going to loop through it, and for each animal we're just going to output a text with the animal name. We put an exclamation point behind the name because we know that every animal will have that property name, so we're not worried about this returning a null, and it won't crash our app. If we run this now, we should see just nothing is crashing first of all, but we should see a list. And actually, the reason why we don't see a list right now is because we have a loop, but we need to put it inside of a list. So if you put a list, if you embed the for each loop inside a list and then run this code again, we should see essentially an empty list of rows because we haven't saved anything into our core data database yet. Cool. So this seems to be working. Now let's add a text field so we can input something into our app. That text field is going to just, the placeholder text is going to say add new. And now what we need to do is bind it to a property. So we say at state property. And the reason it's at state is because in SwiftUI, we have to wrap the property with this tag when it's going to change. And we're going to change this when we type text into it. It's going to keep changing. That's why we need the at state marker. Now we can connect our text field to this property that we created. Make sure there's a $sign there because it needs to be actually bound to it. And now we'll just add the save button so that when we write something into the text field, we hit the button that's going to then save it into our database. We haven't made a function to save yet, so we'll just leave it empty and test it so far. Okay, we see our text field. We can write something into it, and we have a button, but obviously if we write something, click save, nothing will happen yet. We also added a multi-text alignment to the text field to make sure that it's in the middle of the screen. It looks a little bit nicer. Now let's write our save function so that when we hit save, something actually happens and we save this animal name into our database. So we're going to say let new animal equal animals of context self.context. Now, all we're saying is like, let's create this new thing that is of type animals, which we defined in our core data model. So once we have that, we're going to give it a name, and the name is going to be new animal name, which is our property on line 6. So that's where we're going to grab the text, and then we're going to save this to the database. So now, if we write something in the field, let's say cat, and hit save, it goes into our database and then gets refreshed into the list that we've created with the for each loop. That's it. That's how we create something new. And if you turn the app off and on, if you close it and open it, you'll see that it's still there, which means that the storage is persistent and it's working as intended. So that's the create part of the CRUD. Now let's do the delete part of it. If we do .onDelete on the for each loop, all we have to do here is say index set in, and then within that say for index in index set self dot context dot delete. And what do we want to delete? We want to delete the self dot animals at the index brackets to identify which animal we want to delete. So this will work every time we delete a row. Is just going to delete that specific animal. And we should, as a good practice I found, is do a save as well, because sometimes if you don't do a save, it doesn't save it. It just deletes it in the session, and then when you restart the app, it's still there. So now we see we can delete something and it's gone even after we restart the app. So we have the delete functionality working. All that's left now is the update. And in order to do this, we're going to do a tap gesture on top of the text. So the reason we do this is when you tap on the name, we want the name to appear back into the text field on top. So when you have a on tap gesture, we'll say self.newAnimalName equals animal.name. And now if you click on cat, you see that it appears back on top. And if you write dog or bird, those get created as new entities. What we're missing is the update function. So we can create new things, and we can sort of, when you click on something, it appears on top, but it doesn't get updated. So if we click save, it just creates a new version of it. So what we need to do is create a placeholder property, and we're going to call it selected animal. So, and it's going to be of type animals, ? Because we're not, it might be null. When you first start the app, it's going to be null. And then when you tap on an animal, we're going to set this selected animal property to the animal of that row. So the entire animal object gets stored in this property on line 7. And then we put that in as a parameter into our save function. And then we have to input an animal when we call the function. So we're going to put self.selectedAnimal. That way, when we hit save, it gets this animals object. And what we need to do then within the save function is split it and say like, okay, if the selected animal is nil, then go ahead and save whatever is in the text field. But if it's not nil, if we've put something into the selected animals object, that means we want to edit something that already exists. So here, what we're going to do is write the code to edit an existing animals. So we're going to take animal because we know it exists in this case. And its name, we're going to make the self.newAnimalName. So that way, the new edited name will become the true name of the animal that we've selected. And we're going to do, again, context save to make sure that we save it into the database. And once we've done that, we're also going to clear the text field. We're going to say new animal name equals blank. And then we're also going to clear the selected animal property. We're going to say equals nil. That way it's back to being clear and we can start over again. So hopefully that's clear. The save function has sort of two parts. Oh, and we need to wrap the second part in a perform and wait, because this functionality is going to take some time to do. So I found that if you do perform and wait, it actually works that way. So wrap that code in a context.perform and wait, and that should work fine for you. But essentially, the save function either creates a new animal or updates an existing animal if you've selected one already. So let's see how that works. If we select dog2 and change it to dog3 and hit save, now it says dog3. If we select bird and write bird2, now it saves it. That's updating an existing animal. If you close this, you'll see that everything gets saved and it is actually persistent as what we want. So this covers all of the functionalities of a basic CRUD app. Hopefully that was useful to you. And from here on out, you can update it and add more and more functionality. But as you can see, this is something you can do in less than 40 lines of code. We can clean up the code and make it just neater and more concise in some places. But this is super easy. I think SwiftUI and Core Data will work even better in the future. But this is if you're wondering how to get it to work at this point in 2020. Hopefully this was useful. If you did like it, please hit like and subscribe and come back for more videos.